My wife slept with her ex on our wedding day, believing I'd never discover it. Now she alone, the consequences as I walk away. Our wedding day was supposed to be the happiest day of our lives, a day I had been dreaming of for years. I had everything meticulously planned: the flowers, the cake, the guests, the music. Every detail was accounted for. We had been through ups and downs, but we had fought through them, and I believed we had worked through everything. My wife Sarah and I had been together for 5 years. I loved her deeply, and I thought that love was enough to keep us going through any storm. Everything seemed perfect, or at least, that's what I thought. But as the morning of our wedding approached, I couldn't shake this nagging feeling. It wasn't paranoia, at least I didn't think it was. It was more like an intuitive sense that something wasn't right. The excitement of the day ahead should have drowned out any concerns, but something inside me wasn't at ease. Maybe it was the long hours spent planning the wedding. Maybe I hadn't been paying enough attention to us. But Sarah had been acting distant for weeks. She'd been glued to her phone, avoiding eye contact and canceling our plans last minute. The affection we'd shared seemed to be fading. At first, I thought it was just pre-wedding stress. But as the days went by, I began to doubt myself. She had been more withdrawn than usual, and it was starting to weigh on me. We had been through so much, and the thought of losing her on the eve of our wedding didn't seem possible. I dismissed it as nerves. I convinced myself it was just a phase, just wedding jitters. The ceremony itself was beautiful. Everything went smoothly. Sarah looked radiant as she walked down the aisle, her smile bright and her eyes sparkling. For a brief moment, everything felt perfect. I felt the weight lift off my shoulders as I promised to love and cherish her for the rest of my life. But even in that moment of happiness, deep down, I felt that nagging feeling that something wasn't quite right. I pushed it aside, focusing on the vows, the love we were promising to each other. I told myself everything would be fine. Later, at the reception, the world seemed to be in celebration. Guests were dancing, laughing, and enjoying the night. But even then, something felt off. Sarah seemed more distant than ever. She kept sneaking off to take calls, avoiding the spotlight and the attention of the crowd. Her energy didn't match the occasion. She wasn't engaged in the celebration like she should have been. My best man, Tom, noticed it too and whispered in my ear, "You okay, man? Sarah seems off." I nodded, trying to push the thoughts away. I was too focused on the night to let it ruin my mood. I tried to push the unease aside, focusing on the guests, the food, and the music. But as the evening wore on, the discomfort I felt only grew. It was as if I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on it. That night, as the reception wound down, I found myself alone in the hotel room we had rented for the night, waiting for Sarah to join me. The silence in the room felt oppressive. The bed was empty. The night was supposed to be ours, but I was left there, restless, waiting. The minutes ticked by, and my heart began to race. Why wasn't she here? The unease I had felt all day intensified. And then, my phone buzzed. It was an unexpected message from an unknown number. I opened it with a sense of dread, not knowing what to expect. But the moment I saw the words, my heart stopped. "I hope you know that Sarah and I were together earlier today. She slept with me before the wedding." My hands started shaking as I stared at the screen. The words sent chills through my entire body. My mind raced, and I couldn't breathe. The room around me seemed to close in. The message made everything click, all the signs, all the distance I had felt. It all came rushing back in an overwhelming flood of realization. My wife had betrayed me on our wedding day with her ex. The man who I thought was just a distant part of her past had found a way into our future, into the most sacred day of our lives. I couldn't believe what I was reading. It didn't feel real. I had to confront her, but I couldn't bring myself to call her right away. The shock was too much. I was trembling, my mind racing with disbelief. How could she do this? How could she betray me so cruelly on the day that was supposed to be the beginning of our forever? I dialed her number, my hands shaking as the phone rang endlessly. I needed answers. I needed to hear her voice, but deep down I knew there was nothing she could say that would undo the damage. The silence between the rings felt like an eternity. I knew she wasn't coming to me. She wasn't even here on the most important night of our lives. The weight of the betrayal crashed over me like a tidal wave. There was no pretending anymore. There was no way back. I had been deceived. The woman I had trusted with my heart, the one I thought would be by my side forever, had shattered everything with a single, unforgivable act. And in that moment, I knew I was done. There was no going back. The next morning I woke up in a cold sweat, my mind a storm of confusion and anger. The room felt suffocating. I could barely catch my breath as memories of the previous night resurfaced. My wedding day, the dream I had longed for, now shattered. The message from her ex still burned in my mind, a cruel reminder of the betrayal I had just discovered. How could she do this to me on the one day that was supposed to mark the beginning of our forever? I stood in front of the mirror, staring at my reflection, trying to understand what had happened. How had I ended up here? I was supposed to be the happiest man in the world, and instead I was standing on the precipice of an emotional collapse. I hadn't even heard from Sarah since the reception, and that only deepened my unease. The door opened, and there she was, Sarah. She looked as though she hadn't slept at all, her dress from last night wrinkled, her makeup smeared, and her eyes swollen from crying. She froze when she saw me standing in front of the mirror. For a brief moment, I thought I saw a flicker of regret in her eyes, but it was fleeting. "Hi," she whispered, her voice barely audible. It was as if she was testing the waters, unsure of how to approach the wreckage she had created. I couldn't respond immediately. The words were stuck in my throat. My heart pounded as I tried to keep the rising anger from spilling over. How could she stand here as if everything was fine? How could she act so casual after everything she had done? "Where were you?" I finally managed to ask, my voice shaking with disbelief. She couldn't meet my gaze, instead focusing on the floor. I needed time. I was confused," she said, her voice trembling as though trying to find an excuse, but it was weak, hollow. Confused? I couldn't comprehend how she could justify what she had done. "Confused?" I repeated, my voice rising in anger. "You were with him, weren't you? Your ex. You slept with him on the day of our wedding, and now you expect me to just accept it? To pretend that everything is fine?" Her eyes filled with tears, and she took a step toward me, but I couldn't let her touch me. "I'm so sorry, Mark," she cried. "I don't know why I did it. It was a huge mistake. Please, just let me explain." I shook my head, my chest tight with grief. "No, you don't get to explain this. You don't get to take it back. You've ruined everything, Sarah." The weight of her betrayal pressed down on me. My heart, which had once been full of love for her, now felt heavy and broken. I had given her everything: trust, loyalty, love, and this is how she repaid me. "I'm done," I said, my voice firm and final. "I can't marry you. Not after what you've done. I'm walking away." Her face crumpled, and she reached out for me, but I stepped back. "Please, Mark, don't do this. I love you. It won't happen again. I swear." But it was too late. I knew the truth. Her words didn't hold weight anymore. The damage was done. I walked past her, grabbing my bag from the bed. Every step I took felt heavier, but I didn't look back. I didn't need to. As I walked out of the hotel room, I felt a strange sense of clarity. The confusion, the heartbreak, the anger, it was all still there. But now I was free. The weight of betrayal was lifted. I had walked away from the life we had built together, and in doing so, I had taken back my power. The streets outside were quiet, and for the first time in days, I felt something other than pain. I felt relief. I had walked away from a wedding, from the woman I thought I would spend my life with, but in doing so, I had reclaimed my dignity. I knew the future would be uncertain, but I also knew that I couldn't let this betrayal define me. I wasn't going to let Sarah's actions control my life. I was done with being part of someone else's game. This was my chance to rediscover who I was, someone who deserved better, someone who could move forward and rebuild. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy, but it was mine to walk. And in that moment, I realized that this was just the beginning of finding my true self again, free from the pain of betrayal. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more watching videos.